A region is often defined by its culture, which one can find in food, art, and music. The latter plays a prominent role in the Peach State today, but its roots stretch well into the past. It's all part of the soundtrack that accompanies the narrative that is Georgia.
Like a warm peach cobbler, Georgia's music history is richly layered, sweet, and oozing with delicious flavors born from the soil of the state itself. Blues, country, rock and roll, jazz, and gospel, all musical genres that would at one point or another flow out of the rural town churches and nightclubs and into the recording studios of Nashville and New York. Ma Rainey, Chet Atkins, Little Richard, and other native daughters and sons planted seeds that have given rise to a new crop of musical artists. And a public with a healthy appetite for good music would spur enterprising individuals to create a bevy of events that are now staples in live entertainment.
But one person who himself has also been an active part of this musical narrative is producer-executive Chaka Zulu. One might say his career path was inevitable. Even still, what he managed to create is far from ludicrous, as you'll see in today's Executive Profiles.
Chaka Zulu is cool.
Yes, yes.
Did you like it as a child?
Yes, actually. I was told what it meant, and I was made to understand what the name meant. Now, of course, I did get teased, and
sure,
you know, people didn't understand how I received the name, but you know, the legacy and the history of the name, and as it was explained to me from my parents, gave me a certain pride with it. So even when people didn't understand it, I was able to make them understand it.
Let's talk about your roots.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go back to your mom, especially.
My mother's musical roots and background, she sang, and she sang background for Miriam Makeba. And my mother did her final tour with Miriam when she was 7, 8 months pregnant with me. And Miriam, you know, looked at my mother one day and said, "Your child has a warrior spirit. You must give him the name of my king, Chaka Zulu."
That's where it came from.
Yes, sir. So my mother really did her thing, and back in those days, so of course I was born into music. My father was also into music, played saxophone and percussion for Gil Scott-Heron and a jazz artist by the name of Sun Ra. So you know, I just been in and around music my whole life.
The flowers woke up blooming and put on a color show.
How old were you when music was like the fire?
The very vivid memory started around 7, where we were on tour with Kool and the Gang and all of these different artists, and I would just stand side stage or be backstage, and I was just taking it all in. It was just a musical house, always music playing, always singing music, creating music. You know, my parents taught me how to read and write music, which led to some element of, you know, artist aspirations.
So was the plan to professionally go into music even from those early days? I mean, how could you not?
Yeah, the idea was that, you know, I'm first generation hip hop. So when I was turning 9 years old, hip hop was the first record I heard on the radio was, you know, Sugar Hill Gang. But when you heard it on the radio, we're like, you know, they're listening to hip hop on the radio. And that was a whole nother, you know, battery in my back as far as like, oh, this is really possible. Like, I can actually make music that I love and like and be, you know, a part of this world, you know. So it was exciting. It was exciting.
Track your career for me from the hip hop start, because you've been involved in so many different things in the entertainment world.
Yeah,
it's remarkable.
I jokingly say that I've had every job ever in hip hop, and that means from carrying crates to passing out flyers to cleaning studios to, you know, just being a studio rat and sitting there and listening and learning. Hip hop culture was you had to be all of it. You had to know how to break dance. You had to understand graffiti, you know, you had to understand DJing, or you got to have some on the mic skills. So I've done all of those things, you know, and was good at some and okay at, you know, others. But I totally immersed myself in the culture of hip hop. And again, it was our culture at that time. It wasn't really like pop culture. It wasn't like people understood it. And so it was just a youth movement, and I threw myself right into it. But then at a certain point, I was like, you know what? You know, I'm not as passionate about being in front of the camera as I am, you know, with just being in and around and affecting the music, you know, whether it was from a creation standpoint or a business standpoint. Stand up! From the behind the scenes perspective, you know, even though I may have an artist like a Ludacris who masters his craft and really becomes great at being in front of the camera, in my mind, I know that that may be short-lived, or at some point that I need to transition that to another stage, you know. So in building the brand, I have to be thinking about transitioning the brand into other areas so that eventually the brand doesn't die, or it just doesn't have one level of shelf life.
Speak to the golden era of hip hop in Atlanta.
It was around that time, I would say in the 90s, early 90s.
Welcome to Atlanta where the players play and we ride on them things like every day.
You know, Jermaine Dupri and Dallas Austin and Organized Noise began to self-define themselves here with a sound and a vibe and a culture that was uniquely Atlanta. And it was, you know, I kind of outlined this. I did a documentary called ATL, The Untold Rise of Hip Hop in Atlanta. And it outlined it perfectly, you know, from everything from civil rights all the way through, you know, Atlanta's growth, boom period, resurgence, you know, and then, you know, its current place in culture. For what it's done today, the pride that it built in the city and the pride that it still resonates culturally, it can't be duplicated. People have tried.
Your relationship with Ludacris is...
Yeah, 20 years. Oddly enough, funny story, I never really wanted to be a manager. And he asked me, and I don't know what made me say yes, but here we are 20 years later. And it's been a joy and a blessing to work with him. He's an amazing person. Started the Ludacris Foundation in 2001. It's a labor of love, and it's a lot of work, but we love doing it. And we're gonna keep doing that work. You know, under the banner of the Ludacris Foundation, or just in general, we're gonna be serving our community.
What do you see your future oriented?
I'm inspired and infused by the opportunities of the change that our industry is going through recently. So I'm always reformulating myself, you know, in a perspective to make sure that my ideas are very pure, my ideas are very strong. You know, even as we do business every day, you know, you have these structural changes, but the idea is what's gonna save the industry. If the music industry would have known what was coming, they would have paid a lot more attention to Napster. You know, but they were so anti-Napster, you know, and then they wanted to shut it down, but it was like the prerequisite to Apple, you know, and so that arrogance that the music industry had put us in a bind, so to speak. And we're catching up, and we're still playing catch up. But it's those critical thinkers, those progressive thinkers, which I consider myself to be, that is going to be able to, you know, right the ship, so to speak.
Staying true to his motto of evolution, Chaka Zulu has several projects in the pipeline. He recently co-produced a TV show with fellow Atlanta native Ryan Seacrest. The show, which was sold to CBS, centers around an Atlanta marching band. Chaka could soon add restaurateur to his resume. He's partnering to launch a new dining establishment inside the Atlanta airport. Straight ahead, several schools in the University System of Georgia go head-to-head to determine which can boast of having the most students. Some of the names may surprise you. Stay tuned. Atlanta Business Chronicle's Biz will be right back.